We shall never surrender.
One small step for man.
I have a dream. Ask not what your country can do for you.
What's the status quo of your favorite quote? Professor Buzzkill explains all on Quote or No Quote.
Yes, that's right. It's the old professor here giving you the status quo on one of your favorite quotes. I try every day to live up to my ancient and admirable family name, Buzzkill. Some days are easier than others, and this is certainly one of those. People often take the quotation, "It's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness," not only as comforting advice on how to get through tough times, but also wise words coming from a wholly admirable person, and that wholly admirable person was Eleanor Roosevelt. Well, today, I'm going to buzzkill this very popular quote, this very touching quote, and this attribution to the First Lady. As you know, while she was First Lady during the presidency of her husband, FDR, Eleanor Roosevelt worked for civil rights publicly, very publicly, as well as working behind the scenes and in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. She was one of the few, for instance, who championed fair distribution of benefits from the New Deal to all Americans, no matter their race or racial background. She also campaigned against prejudice and bigotry towards Japanese Americans during World War II. And for both of these things, she received a great deal of public backlash and hatred. But she continued to work and speak on behalf of civil rights in the post-war years, right up until her death in 1962. So there are very few people who embodied the moral action of lighting a candle rather than cursing the darkness than Eleanor Roosevelt. And that's why Adlai Stevenson famously eulogized her in 1962 with a statement, quote, "She would rather light a candle than curse the darkness, and her glow has warmed the world," unquote. But as so often happens, buzzkillers, a quote about a famous person gets attributed as a quote from that person. And there's no evidence that Eleanor Roosevelt ever said it, nor that it originated with her. Like the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice quote, which is misattributed to Martin Luther King all the time, better to light a candle than curse the darkness was first said by a 19th century minister. William L. Watkinson, Methodist minister from England, said it in a sermon entitled The Invincible Strategy. Quote, "Evil is not overcome by denunciation. It is surprising how much efficacy is supposed to go with denunciation. Real, constructive, aggressive good is of far greater significance than eloquent invective. Such invective has its place, but it must be accompanied by active, practical effort." Watson then went on to quote the famous English essayist Thomas Carlyle, who complained in a review that another essayist was wasting his talents writing forgettable political doggerel. This is what Carlyle wrote, quote, "We could truly wish to see such a mind as his engage rather in considering what, in his own sphere, could be done than what, in his own or other spheres, ought to be destroyed, rather in producing or preserving the true, rather than mangling and slashing asunder the false." Watkinson then went on to summarize Carlyle's ideas, as well as the human temptation to spend time buzzkilling this way. Quote, "But denunciatory rhetoric is so much easier and cheaper than good works, and proves a popular temptation. Yet is it far better to light the candle than curse the darkness." The exact date and place of the sermon are unknown, but it was published in 1907. Reprinted in a religious periodical entitled China's Millions in the same year, Watkinson's Invincible Strategy sermon was used by Christian missionaries in China in the early decades of the 20th century. This may be one of the reasons why the light a candle sentiment is sometimes called an ancient Chinese proverb or attributed to Confucius. But like the Eleanor Roosevelt misattribution, there's no evidence that it comes from China or a Chinese philosopher. The real author of the quote is indeed William Watkinson in 1907, taking his cue from Thomas Carlyle in the 1830s. Still, buzzkillers, if you're reading between the lines, so to speak, while listening to this episode, I'm sure you can tell that I'm really an old softy when it comes to Eleanor Roosevelt and what she stood for. And I think it's not the worst buzz-killing sin to attribute this quote to that great American. So light a candle, buzzkillers, and put that in your pipe and smoke it. Talk to you next week.
Epicast.